Hi, it's really great to be here. So my name is Zak Greene, and I'm a member of Strike Debt New York. And I'd like to talk a little bit today about how we might challenge debt, and thereby challenge capitalism. We're in the midst of a debt crisis right now in the United States and across the globe. 3/4 of all Americans carry some kind of debt burden. Medical illness was a factor in 62% of all bankruptcies in the United States. And 1 in every 7 Americans is being pursued by a debt collector right now. So this is really a real problem. But why is it so widespread? Well, we see that the cost of basic needs, things like healthcare, housing, education, transportation, have increased over the years, the past 50 years, while wages have remained completely stagnant. Look at this graph. This shows productivity versus wage growth from 1947 to 2010. We see that in somewhere around the mid-1970s, the paths begin to diverge. Productivity increases, but average hourly wages stay the same. So that's about 40 years of economic gains not benefiting workers at all. If productivity and average hourly wages were to increase at the same rate for the past 40 years, they'd be 3 times higher than they are today. In addition, unemployment has skyrocketed since 2009. It's been higher than in decades. And the safety net, the social safety net, continues to erode. People really have no choice but debt to finance their basic needs. We also see fringe financial services becoming very common and spreading all over in our neighborhoods. This is a payday loan office. These payday loan offices, they cater to low-income people without bank accounts. They provide a cash advance to people for about 2 weeks or a month, and then after that time, if the borrower doesn't pay back the loan, the interest rate skyrockets to triple digits, sometimes 1,000%. So we see a loan for $200 sometimes becoming a lifelong debt burden. And when I was reading about microfinancing in India, this recent development, it reminded me of these payday loans. Both cater to low-income people and the underbanked. And because in India, loans aren't provided by banks, the debt burden extends to a person's family as well. And this development has coincided with an increase in suicides among rural farmers. In the United States, we have no public health care system. It's mostly based on private insurance. If you don't have insurance for whatever reason, if your employer doesn't offer you insurance, if you can't afford it, or if your insurance just doesn't cover the health care you need, then you're on your own. You have to pay your own medical expenses out of pocket. So I'm going to share a couple stories that were sent into our Tumblr with you today. So she writes, I just counted out $7 and change for the copay of my husband's meds and mine. He's on Medicaid and I'm on Medicare. He's unemployed and I'm disabled. However, we are short $200. The only money we have until June is about $40. We have not paid our car payment in 2 months. We haven't paid our electric bill or gas bill in 2 months. And today I will be panhandling for the first time in my life. Another woman writes, I'm a 24-year-old college graduate. I have a BA in English. After 5 years of work to better myself, I am now working 40 to 50 hours a week, making barely more than I did when I graduated high school 6 years ago. I work 2 jobs and can't afford to move out of my parents' house, even with a roommate. I have $33,000 to pay in student loans. I can't find a full-time job because I have no experience, and no one will hire me so I can gain some. I'm stressed out and depressed. I feel trapped. The American dream is dead for my generation. So it's really hard to listen to these stories and see debt as anything other than a tool for wealth extraction for the most vulnerable people. I'm curious in the audience, how many people have heard of Occupy Wall Street? Okay, cool. So for those who haven't heard of it, Occupy Wall Street was a response to a lot of these trends, this idea of not being able to support the basic needs of its citizens and of capitalism as a system, as an economic system, being unable to provide the basic needs of so many. The encampment in Zuccotti Park provided food, housing, jobs, healthcare, and even a library to anybody who showed up. And it was a demonstration through mutual aid that another world is possible. So I want to go into a few of the things that I think might have led to Occupy Wall Street, some of these factors. One is very high inequality. We're kind of living in a new Gilded Age. Most of the gains of the past 40 years have gone to the top 1%. Another is the 2008 financial crisis and the subprime mortgage bubble. The subprime mortgages are kind of similar to payday loans in that they target low-income Americans, and after a few years, the interest rates rise quite a bit to levels that nobody can afford. And when this bubble burst, mortgages bottomed out, and even mortgages that weren't using subprime loans, the values of people's houses just plummeted. And yet there was no response from our leaders. There was no way for somebody to refinance their mortgage. And meanwhile, the banks were swiftly bailed out in the immediate aftermath of the 2008 crisis. We had a situation where decades of mergers and acquisitions between banks and the repeal of crucial deregulation, including the Glass-Steagall Act, which required commercial banks to maintain a certain amount of fixed assets. We see these things repealed, and which led to a situation where if a bank were to fail, it would produce a profound ripple effect in the economy. So the banks were really too big to fail. So what happened after 2008? Well, some financial sector regulation happened. There was a bill, but the banks are still bigger than ever. There were even more mergers resulting from the 2008 financial crisis. There was still very little relief for homeowners and very high unemployment, higher than in decades. After the encampment in Zuccotti Park, Occupy Wall Street was forcibly removed. Some of us began coming together to share stories of our debt, and others joined. We called these debtors' assemblies. This is one that happened in New York, and this is one that happened in Oakland. And this was a really powerful experience, people sharing their stories and experiences with debt and their struggles. It really broke through the shame and isolation people felt that debtors feel. And this is something, this shame and isolation, this is something that the banks and the financial institutions benefit from. So out of these debtors' assemblies grew a new group called Strike Debt. Strike Debt's a group dedicated to challenging our illegitimate debts and imagining what a better way to take care of each other might look like. We feel that most debts are illegitimate, and that as far as we're concerned, we owe the big banks nothing and each other everything. We also aim to challenge the assumption that finance is too difficult for the layperson to understand. And I think I'm kind of doing that right now because I'm a web designer and I went to art school, and I'm here talking to you about this finance stuff now, and I do plan to get kind of technical. The first initiative of Strike Debt was the Rolling Jubilee. This was a campaign to provide relief to debtors in which we would buy their debt for pennies on the dollar and cancel it. It was sort of a bailout for the 99%. And you might be wondering, how are we able to buy the debt so cheap? This is where I get technical. When debt is considered a non-performing asset, when a loan hasn't been repaid in a certain period of time, and this varies from state to state, it must be written off. In fact, there's a law that this debt must be written off, and that law is in the bank's favor. They're able to claim a tax deduction for the full value of the loan. And because they've already written the debt off, because they already have shed all risk for the loan that they issued, they're able to sell the debt in these large packages for just pennies on the dollar. And so the people who buy this debt are debt collectors. These debt collectors range in size from very large companies to very small companies. And all the debt collectors really need to do is collect on a few accounts in order to make a profit. Debt collection is extremely profitable. It's actually been considered a growth industry in the past decade. But very few people know how it works, especially the debtors themselves. One common practice that debt collectors use is to offer the debtor a settlement of 50% of the principal of the loan. But the debtor doesn't know that the debt collector themselves only purchased the loan for 2 or 3% of the principal. They're tricked into thinking this is a good deal, and they feel an extra obligation to pay. The Rolling Jubilee was successful beyond our wildest dreams. So we raised about $700,000 through our website. We crowdfunded this money. Thanks. And this is enough to abolish about $15 million worth of debt. The way we did this is we hosted a telethon in New York. We had bands play, and we announced milestones, and we live streamed it from our website. And the results surpassed our wildest expectations. And as a result, 2 years later, this was in 2012, we hosted this telethon. We're still buying debt today. We can't buy it fast enough. And on our website, you can see a list of all of the debt buys that we've made. So here's one of them. We show the type of debt, which is medical in this case, the number of debtors, the rate of total debt, and the average debt per debtor. But we don't show any personal information about the debtor. So far, we've only bought medical debt as part of the Rolling Jubilee. We're working on buying student debt and also probation debt. But we feel that medical debt is the most egregious form of debt we could think of. Healthcare, I think, is kind of your most basic need to take care of yourself, and no one should have to go into debt for that. Well, although the Rolling Jubilee was very successful, it's really no match for the massive scale of this debt buying industry. It's a very large industry, and nor did we intend to challenge them directly. What we intended to do was raise awareness about the way debt is bought and sold and valued, and educate people about this, and point out the hypocrisy that you're still on the hook for the full amount of your debt, even though banks have shed all risk from the loan, and all the while providing mutual aid to people who are most in need. So to expand this educational outreach, we created this manual called the Debt Resisters Operations Manual. It was written collectively by a group of activists, writers, and academics from within Strike Debt. And it provides practical advice and detailed strategies for fighting common forms of debt, like medical debt and housing debt. And we started originally with a pamphlet, a 100-page pamphlet, and recently in March, we expanded it to a full paperback book. The book is available for purchase online, but we try to make as many copies available for free at outreach events as possible. And the whole text of the manual is available for free on our website. You can go there, strikedebt.org/DROM. But we really want to do more than just educate. We also want to be part of the solution. And the solution that our politicians and leaders have put out has barely scratched the surface of the problem, unfortunately. One example of these solutions is the Emergency Loan Refinancing Act. This was introduced by Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's widely considered one of the most progressive congresspeople in the United States. And what this would do is allow students to refinance their tuition debt at today's rates, which are much lower than they've been in decades. But the problem is this wouldn't address the skyrocketing cost of education itself, the principal of the loan, only the interest. Even in the event that it could pass, it would definitely help students out, but it wouldn't be enough to erase 40 years of no gains in worker average wages. So collective refusal, we think, really is the solution. Many people are already refusing their debt out of necessity, but there are consequences for that. That will have an impact. If you don't pay your loans, that will have an impact on your credit score. You won't be able to buy a house or a car as easily. So we're not asking you to stop paying your loans today. There's an old saying that says, if you owe the bank $10,000, you're at the mercy of the bank. But if you owe the bank $10 million, the bank is at your mercy. So we need to get to that $10 million point. And the only way to do that is to band together, to refuse collectively. Banks rely on this idea that decent people always pay their debts, that it's a moral obligation. But the people I see, the person with only $40 to spend for the month of June, and the young college graduate with tuition debt who can barely make ends meet, I've never met them, but they seem like decent people to me. People who wish they could pay but can't. So our goal with Strike Debt is really to set the stage for decent people with common forms of debt, common creditors, common guarantors, or even common loan servicers to band together and refuse and gain leverage over the banks. And unlike the banks who are only focused on their next quarter ahead, we consider this a long-term goal. And we consider the work that we're doing now as steps toward this goal, breaking through the shame and isolation that debtors feel, allowing them to feel comfortable sharing their stories with one another, the education and mutual aid that the Rolling Jubilee and the manual provide. And also having a presence across the world to catalyze local change. Strike Debt has chapters. I'm part of Strike Debt New York, but we have chapters all over the United States, including Oakland, Austin, Texas, Portland, even Helena, Montana. And we would be really excited to see what a Strike Debt chapter in Bangalore or India would look like. We don't have any international chapters. Thanks. So on our website, we have a downloadable kit, and that allows you to start your own Strike Debt chapter in your area. And the kit provides templates for direct action and case studies of past actions. So that can help you form your own debtors assemblies or other outreach events, direct actions. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you.